Hello, and welcome to the Urban Classroom. Hi, I'm Mrs. Brits, and thank you for joining me today at the Urban Classroom. So today we are moving on to Unit 5. Unit 5 is called the U.S. Constitution, and this unit is kind of long, so I'm going to have to break this unit up into 3 parts. The first part will be the 3 branches of government. That will be the first and the one that I'm teaching today. Next lesson I would teach will be Unit 5, the U.S. Constitution, but I'll focus on the principles of government. And then that third part of this lesson will be the Bill of Rights. Okay, so it's 3 parts because Unit 5 is very long and we're talking about the U.S. Constitution. So let's go ahead and get started. In this lesson, I will teach about the central government. When I'm speaking about the central government, I am talking about the highest level of government in our country. So this will include the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. This is what I'm going to teach today. All right, so let's go back to Unit 4 a little bit to review. Because we know in Unit 4, that was called the Constitutional Convention. It was held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the year was 1787. And the members of Congress, they met in Philadelphia because they wanted to try to fix the shortcoming of the Articles of Confederation, which I like to call the AOC. There was a lot of problems. That's when George Washington said that the government under the AOC was like a rope made out of sand. It did not have enough power to do things that the government needed to do, like tax people or enforcing laws, having problems with Shea and Shea's rebellion. That's when the farmers, they were upset because the government was taking their property away and putting them in prison for not paying their debt. Okay, so they met in Philadelphia. They said, we got to fix this problem that we're having with the government. It's too weak. We can't get anything done. And we're going to have to make some changes or we're not going to be able to survive. So at this meeting, some changes are going to be made to help the government become strong, flexible, but not abusive. Because remember, these are the kind of problems that the colonists had experienced under King George III. That's from Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3. So the framers, these are the men who created the government, very well-educated men who had property, men who controlled the government. They are the framers. And what they're doing is like creating a frame. You know, like you have a picture frame? Well, they are framing the government for America. They're setting out the rules and the guidelines so that America can be strong, flexible, but not abusive. Okay, so we're going to focus on these 3 branches today: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Now, under the AOC, if you look at the picture, you will see that the states had most of the power, but not the federal government. The federal government is the highest level of government. I'm talking about America as a whole. Well, that is going to change because under the U.S. Constitution, the federal government is about to get the majority of the power, but the states also will have powers too. We don't want any abuse. We don't want any tyranny going on. So we're just going to change the levels or change the amount of powers that states have compared to the amount of power that the federal government has. Okay. Now, remember, we don't want the government to be too strong and abusive. So there is an idea that was created by a man named Charles Montesquieu. He was from France. He said, it's not a good idea if you give the federal government too much power. That's not good. It'll become too powerful, too abusive. So it's a better idea if you separate the powers. So that is what we're going to do in our government. We will create 3 branches of government: the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. It's like having a whole number divided into fractions. So each fraction is equal. You have the legislative branch and judicial branch and executive branch. Consider those as fractions, and all together it makes up the central government. Well, we cannot have one branch of government being more powerful than another branch of government. So they are separate and they're also equal. Okay, so there's a separation of power. This idea was presented to the Americans, and they decided that this will be a good thing to do for our country: divide the government into 3 equal parts so that one branch does not become more powerful than the other branch. And that idea, we want to give that to credit towards credit is due. It's from a man named Charles de Montesquieu of France. The U.S. Constitution, it is a document. Okay, this document was written in 1787, and it starts with 3 famous words: we, the people. Now, when the framers, these are the men who got together and decided to change the government to make the government stronger and flexible and not abusive, they said, we, the people, because they were using what is called popular sovereignty. That means the people are making the rules for themselves. And so when they said we, they were speaking for all of Americans, but not really. It was more rich, white, educated men with property. But during this time, those are the people who were in charge. Those are the people who were forming the government. And so when they say we, the people, they're referring to their group. Today, that's different. We, the people, represents everybody, because everybody that lives in this country have rights. We have basic human rights. We have rights just because we are human beings. But it wasn't always like that in this country and other places around the world. Now, the U.S. Constitution is a document, and we call it a living document because changes have been made to it. Those are called amendments, and we'll get to that in another lesson when I talk about the Bill of Rights. But the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It has different parts. The beginning part is called the Preamble. The Preamble just means an introduction. This is telling you what America is about. And then you have the Articles. The Articles are different sections, and we'll explain what those sections are about as well. Then you have a part which is the Bill of Rights. And then you have amendments number 11 to 27. So the amendments are the changes that were made later on in the U.S. Constitution. Okay, there's a man named James Madison. We give him credit. We say that he is the father of the Constitution because during the Constitutional Convention, he was the one who was doing a lot of note-taking and recording information. And so we give him credit as being the father of the Constitution. Later on, he'll go on to be president number 4. Okay. So the U.S. Constitution, it is a document, it's a living document, it is the supreme law of the land, the highest law that our country has. Now, the rest of this lesson is going to focus on the 3 branches of government. We're going to look at the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The legislative branch is a bicameral Congress. So we refer to the legislative branch as Congress. And you've probably seen some pictures of Congress on TV, or you've probably seen some video footage of them meeting. Congress is bicameral. That means it has 2 parts, 2 rooms. And those 2 parts are the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, if you are not familiar with the bicameral Congress, you might want to go back and check out the lesson for Unit 4, the Constitutional Convention, because I explained how we got the Senate and how we got the House of Representatives. So I'll do a very quick review right now. The larger states and the smaller states, they were arguing at that convention about representation in Congress. Congress are the people who are going to control the money. They're people who are going to write bills that can become laws. So an agreement was made between the larger states and the smaller states, because the larger states, they wanted more representation, and the smaller states, they said we want equal representation, so you better treat us fair. If you don't treat us fair, then we're just going to secede and we'll just start our own country and you can just leave us alone. Boy, bye. But fortunately, a deal was made to create a bicameral Congress. So each state was able to get 2 senators. It didn't matter how many people you had in your state. if you had a large amount in your population or a small amount in your population. It didn't matter because everybody was going to be treated equally. All the different states were going to be treated equally. And so that's why there are 2 senators for each state. But the larger state said, that's not fair. What about us? What you gonna do for us? Well, the second part of the deal was the House of Representatives would be created, and the House of Representatives is based on population. So the more the people you have, then the more representatives that you have. These are the lawmakers that are going to serve your state. So the larger states were happy about the House of Representatives, and the smaller states, they were happy about the senators, 2 senators for each state. And so this was called the Great Compromise. That's the actual name of this agreement. It's called the Great Compromise. It fixed the problem between the large states and the small states. Now, later on, there's going to be a little problem, because remember, the more people you count, the more representatives you get. Well, the people in the South, in the southern states, they decided, well, let's count all these Black people, because the more slaves or they were counted, then that could bump your numbers up. You can have more representatives. I hope this is sounding familiar to you. If this is not sounding familiar to you, you better go back and check. You better go back and check and watch Unit 4, the Constitutional Convention, and look at that lesson that I taught. Well, the government decided we can't count all the Black people. We'll come up with this formula, a way to count the population of Black people, because the problem was between the northern states and the southern states. The northern states, they didn't like this way, this idea of counting Black people for representation, because it was going to give an unfair advantage to the southern states. So the agreement was made that the government said we'll count 3/5 of the slave population, 3/5. So, and during this time, Black people were not considered like a whole person. You considered like a fraction of a person, 3/5. So that's where that idea comes from. 3/5 compromise, just count 3/5 of the slave population. Okay, so today we have in our government the legislative branch, which is composed of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, the Senate and the House of Representatives, which is Congress, they have responsibilities. They have jobs to do. And one of their responsibility is to borrow money for our country. Yes, America borrows money from other countries, and we owe other countries money, and that's because we make loans. We take loans out, and then that loan have to be repaid because it is considered a debt. Okay, so America borrows money from places, you know, China, from Japan, Switzerland, Belgium, different countries. We borrow money, but we got to pay it back. But the only branch of government that can borrow money is the legislative branch. No other branch. We need to stop borrowing money, because right now we are like $27 trillion in debt. That is bananas. We owe a lot of money to not a lot of countries. Not good. We got to pay that back. Well, you do, because I don't know how long I'll be around. You'll have to pay that money back, not me. Congress has to pay the military. So people who join the military, they can join like the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine, the Coast Guard. People join out of patriotism. They just love their country. And people join because they're trying to make money. They're trying to make a living for themselves. And maybe they weren't interested in going to college, or maybe they just didn't know what they wanted to do with life, but they didn't want to waste time. So people join the military. Now, when you join the military, everybody not just doing it because, you know, for free. They need to get paid. They got a family, they got kids. And so the government is responsible for paying people who are in the military. And that is called your salary, annual salary. And also the military needs money because they have to pay for provisions. They have equipment to buy. They have to feed soldiers. They need uniform. They need weapons. So a lot of money is needed to properly manage the military. And the only group in our government that can pay the military, handle the money and pay the military, is the legislative branch. No other branch, just the legislative branch. That is Congress. They're responsible for paying the military. Now, when it comes to war, because we have a military, it's not just have a military for no reason. The ultimate reason why we have a military is because we have to prepare if our country needs to go to war. Well, when conflict occurs between different countries, usually their leaders, they get together and they try to talk it out. So, for example, if America have problems, we don't want to just go and just start fighting and hurting people. No, we send leaders over and try to talk things out and see what the problem is and come up with a compromise. But sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes political leaders cannot solve the problem, and that can lead to war. Now, when it comes to war, it is only Congress who can declare war. No other branch can say, okay, we're going to go fight. No, it's not your job. The only job that belongs to, well, the only group that has this job is Congress. They can say, yes, America, we are going to war. They could do the paperwork, and then, you know, the soldiers or people in the Marines or different parts of the military get sent to places to fight, to help, to patrol, a lot of different functions that the military does. But the bottom line is only Congress can actually declare war. We do not let the president do that. That is only Congress. Now, Congress also has the ability and the responsibility to regulate trade and commerce. So I'm talking about imports and exports. Rules have to be made about how we trade with other countries. The imports are things that are made in other countries and then they're brought into our country. That is an import. But also America, we make different products to sell, and those items are exported and sent out into other countries. So Congress is the only group that make rules and laws about how our country trades with other country. And also Congress can make rules about how one state can trade with another state. Okay, so imports and exports, Congress makes the rules for trade and commerce. When you think of commerce, think of commercial. If you watch a commercial, they're trying to do something. They're trying to do something. If you're watching a commercial, they're trying to get your money. So think of commerce as buying, selling, trading. Now, let's focus on Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Earlier, I said that the Constitution had different parts. So the first part was that preamble, that was the introduction, but then you have Article 1. Article 1 was for the legislative branch. It sets up the rules and the guidelines of what the legislative branch can do and what the legislative branch cannot do. So now we're on Article 2. Article 2 is the executive branch. That is the branch where the president manages that the department. So you think of the White House, think of the president, think of the vice president. That's executive, the executive branch. Okay, Article 2 of the Constitution. Now, to understand the executive branch, first we need to know that the founding fathers, the framers, the people who wrote the Constitution, the people who set up our government, they thought that most Americans, well, it's kind of stupid. And said, you can't trust these people to pick a president. They might pick the wrong person. See, during this time in the 1700s, most of the people in America were like farmers. They work in an agricultural area. They were farmers. They grew things. And they weren't really too familiar with what was going on in the government. They didn't follow politics like you can do today. If you watch TV or listen to the radio, you can follow the government and follow politics and see what's happening in our nation. But it wasn't like that during the 1700s. So the delegates at the Constitutional Convention, they said, we can't trust these regular farming people. They don't know enough. They kind of dumb. So we are going to create a system, a voting system that will allow people to indirectly pick the president, but not directly. Can't have that. Indirectly, we pick our presidents. Okay, so that's the Electoral College, and I'll talk about the Electoral College in just a moment. The Electoral College, you got to think of it like the NBA championship. Okay, so you have game after game after game, and you're trying to be the team that wins the most games out of 7. Okay, that's how they do it in NBA. Well, with the Electoral College, think of it as points. The person who wants to be president has to go to different states and ask the people, vote for me. I want to be president. Now, if the people in a certain state, if most of them vote for you, you get to have all the points for that state. Okay, but they're not really called points, they're called electoral votes. See, every state has a certain number of electoral votes. It's based on the population. The more people in your state, the more electoral votes your state gets. If you don't have a lot of people in your state, then your state does not get a lot of electoral votes. Now, the magic number is 270. The first candidate that gets 270 electoral votes becomes the new president of the United States. So it's not based on the popular vote. The popular vote is like, who voted for me? Let me just see how many people voted for me. In America, it could be in the millions. Millions of people can vote for a presidential candidate. But when it comes to the Electoral College, there are only, the magic number that you'll need is 270 electoral votes. So let me give you an example. The state of Texas has 38 electoral votes. So that means if a person goes to the state of Texas and say, hey, vote for me, I want to be president. And then the people vote. We count up all the votes. And if the majority of the people vote for, let's say, candidate A, if most of the people vote for candidate A, then the people have selected that candidate to get the points, to get the electoral votes. So that means the person who wins Texas, if you count up all the votes and most of the people voted for, let's say, Donald Trump, then he would get 38 electoral votes, because that's how many electoral votes that the state of Texas offers. And so you have to repeat the pattern. You go from different state to different state, and trying to get as many electoral votes as possible. Let's say California. California has 55 electoral votes because California got a lot of people. Now, if you go to California and say, hey, vote for me, and the people, they vote, then you count up all the votes, and you got to see who had the most votes. Well, Donald Trump did not have the most votes for California. Hillary Clinton did. Now, I'm going back to the 2016 election. Hillary Clinton won California. So that means she would get, since most people voted for her, she would get the 55 electoral votes from California. Okay, so just continue until the first person gets 270 points. That is the Electoral College. It's the system that we use to elect our president. Now, selecting a president is a task. We just had the 2020 election, and we know that Joe Biden, who used to be the vice president under Barack Obama, he is now the president-elect. So in January, there's going to be the official inaugural ceremony where he will officially become the president of the United States. So this map, you can see that different states have different numbers because the numbers are based on the population. The more people in your state, the more electoral votes you have. And when the people vote in every state, those votes are counted, and it just depends which candidate will get those electoral votes. The two most popular political parties are the Democrats and the Republicans. And so we had Joe Biden, who was the Democrat, and then you have Donald Trump, who was the Republican. And it turns out that Biden was able to get the most electoral votes. He got the 270 first. All right. So this is our way of selecting our president. Now, to be president, there's only 3 qualifications. Okay, we're learning about the executive branch. That's where the president manages the electoral branch. So you only have to be 35 years old. You have to be born in the United States of America, and you have to be living. You have to live in the United States for 14 years. See, some people are born in America, but they can move and go live in a different country. But to be president, you have to be in the United States for 14 years. If you remember the election with Barack Obama, it was a lot of uncertainty because people were saying that he was born in Africa. And that would be a problem because you have to be born in America. But none of it was true. It was a lie. And it was proven later because he chose to show America his birth certificate, showing that he was born in Hawaii. And yes, his father is from Africa, but his mom was American, and she had him in Hawaii. So these are the qualifications to be president. And when you become president, you are the national chief executive. That means you are like the manager, you are the supervisor, you are the boss, you are the person who represents or is the spokesperson for the United States of America. And when you are elected as president, you serve for a 4-year term. Now, after 4 years, you can go through the whole process of the Electoral College on the next election, because we have elections every 4 years. And if you get reelected, if you go through that whole process again with the Electoral College and you win, you get that 271st, then you can become president for another 4 years. So a total of 8. George Washington was the first president, and he actually served for 8 years. Now, when he served, they asked him, could you serve for 4 more? And he's like, no, I can't do that. That's too much like being a king. And he wasn't, hungry for power. So George Washington, he set a precedent about only serving a total of 8 years. And then he said, a person needs to just move on. Let somebody else come in and serve. All right. But I'll talk more about Washington and the president when I get to Unit 6. Right now we're in Unit 5, and I'm just giving you an overview of the executive branch. And so we're focusing on the president. So the most the president can serve is for 2 terms, which equals a total of 8 years. Now, the president has what is called a cabinet. A cabinet means workers, helpers. And these helpers are needed because the president is only one person, can't do everything. So the president needs help. It could be the vice president, the secretary of treasury, the secretary of state, secretary of defense. These are people who help the president do the job. And every president gets to choose their team. These are the cabinet leaders. Now, some cabinet members, they have to be approved by the Senate. So the president has to work together with the Senate to see if this person can be confirmed. Confirmed means approved, because the Senate has the power to say, nope, we don't like that person, and they can't have that job because they got some shady stuff going on in their background. It happens. But again, that is a whole different lesson when I start talking about checks and balances, and that's a part of the principles of government, which will be the next lesson that I teach. Okay, so one of the powers that the president has is that the president can nominate ambassadors. Now, ambassadors are leaders that go and serve in other countries. They speak on behalf of the president, and they try to establish good relationships and maintain good relationships between America and other foreign countries. Well, we in America have ambassadors that come and serve in our country, but the president also can send people to other countries to serve as ambassadors. The president can nominate the person, like make a suggestion and say, this person I think is pretty good. They will be an intelligent person. They know about foreign affairs and they know about the government. They will be a good spokesperson and we could send them to a country. But that's just a nomination. Again, it is the Senate. The Senate is part of the legislative branch. There are 2 senators for each state. So the Senate, they will decide if this person really is a good person to serve as ambassador. They have to be, the person would have to be confirmed. So the nominee must be confirmed by the Senate. If the Senate say, yes, this is a good person and this person is qualified, then that person will be able to serve as an ambassador. But it's a whole process. But what you need to know is that the executive branch, the president has the power to nominate a person to serve as an ambassador in a foreign country. Now, the president also has the power to nominate a Supreme Court justice. Now, the Supreme Court is the highest court system in our country. Okay, that's at the federal level. And recently we had Justice Ginsburg, she passed away. And when a judge passes away, the president has the responsibility of helping fill that seat. So the president can only make the nomination. We don't let other judges pick another judge to serve as a Supreme Court justice. No, that would be too much power. So we allow the president to make a nomination, but then the Senate, that's from the legislative branch, the Senate can confirm or deny that person to serve as a Supreme Court justice. So when the president makes the nomination, that person meets with the Senate and they're going to ask question after question after question after question. They want to know about how you did in school. They want to know about what do you support, what do you disagree with, what are your political ideas, what do you want for America? A whole lot of questions to try to see what kind of person you are. And usually those confirmations, they can last. They can last for weeks. They can even last for months. It just depends. So the Supreme Court justice is selected or nominated by the president, then confirmed by the Senate. If everything works out okay, then that person becomes a Supreme Court justice. So we did have a replacement for Judge Ginsburg, and then we had Justice Scalia. He passed away a few years ago, and he was replaced as well. But there are a total of 9 Supreme Court justices. The next thing I want to talk about when it comes to the power of the president is that the president has the power to make a bill become a law. Okay, so the legislative branch, they don't write laws. They write what are called bills. Think of a bill like an idea, something that you want to become a law. It's just people got together, they were talking, and they came up with some ideas, they wrote them down, and they said, we want this to become a law. Well, the president has the power to make that bill become a law. The president can read the information in the bill, he can read the information, read the ideas, and if the president agrees with the bill, then that signature, the president's signature, makes the bill become a law. But the president could read the information and say, I don't like this. This stuff not fair. It's not right. I'm not doing this. The president could disagree with the bill that Congress writes. And then the president, he can veto. Veto means to cancel the bill, to disagree with it. It's like, no, I don't like this. It's not good. I'm not going to do this. So the president has the power to either approve or he can veto, which is to cancel. And he can stop a bill from becoming a law. Yeah. But there are some things that Congress could do to get around that. Again, that goes into our lessons of checks and balances. Checks and balances are a way that the different branches of government, they watch each other to make sure that they don't abuse their power. So there is a way that the Congress can go around the president and make a bill become a law. It's going to take 2/3 votes from the Senate and 2/3 from the House of Representatives, and then they could override the president's veto. Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to the executive branch, which, I'm talking about the president, is that the president controls the military. Now, the president, remember, cannot declare war. That's not the president's job. That is Congress' job, the Senate, the House of Representatives. They have the power to declare war, Congress. But the president is in charge of the military. So once Congress says, yes, we're going to war and do the paperwork, then the president now is in charge of the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine, the Coast Guard. They are under the control of the president. The reason why we don't let the president declare war and control the money for the military and be the commander-in-chief is because that's too much power. That could be very dangerous. If you have a person who controls the soldiers and pay the soldiers, or control the soldiers and then say if we're going to war or not, that's too much power. It could be dangerous. You might have someone who will just do something foolish or do something dangerous or get insulted by a person from another leader from another country, and then next thing you know, we're in war and we didn't want to be in war. So our government has a system to kind of protect us from just jumping into a war with some country because the president didn't like what the person said or what a leader did. So commander-in-chief just means you're in charge of the military. Now, I want to move on to Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution. So Article 1 was the legislative branch, Article 2 was the executive branch, and now Article 3 of the Constitution is about the judicial branch. Okay, each of these articles are establishing the rules and the guidelines for the three branches of government. So let's take a look at the judicial branch. Some of this I've talked about, because I explained to you that the president is the one who nominates the Supreme Court justice, and then the Senate has to confirm or deny that Supreme Court justice. If you are a justice, you will serve for life. That means you don't have to worry about your job or trying to get elected or trying to get people to vote for you. It doesn't work like that. Once you become a justice, you serve until you either die, you resign. Resign means that you want to quit, or you just said, I've served for a long time, and it could have been like 30, 40 years serving as a justice, and now you just want to stop and retire. So if you are serving as a justice, you don't have to worry about trying to get the job again every year or trying to keep your job. It was set up for this reason because if you go back to like Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, when the colonists had their justices, those justices were selected by the king. And if you were selected by the king, you pretty much need to do what the king wants you to do, or you would lose your job. So when the Americans set up the new government, they did not want a person to have to fear for their job as a justice, to work in the court system at the highest level. So that is one of the reasons why they decide that once a person becomes a Supreme Court justice, that person serves for life or until they resign, or if they become deceased, if they die. So at the bottom of the screen on the right hand side, you will see these are the current 9 Supreme Court justices. Okay, now the Supreme Court justices, they have power. Our Supreme Court has power, and that power is called judicial review. It comes from a very important court case called Marbury versus Madison. This court case, well, the bottom line of the court case is that the Supreme Court has the power to declare the constitutionality of a law. In other words, the Supreme Court can say a law that Congress made and that the president signed, after taking a look at it, after reviewing it, the Supreme Court could say that this law is not fair. It's unconstitutional. And if the Supreme Court says that the law is unconstitutional, that means that law must be voided. It cannot be used anymore. It has to be taken away, canceled. Okay, so that is only the job of the Supreme Court justices. They have the power of judicial review, and their job is to interpret the law, explain what the Constitution really means. The president cannot do that. The legislative branch cannot do that. Only the judicial branch can actually interpret and explain legally what the U.S. Constitution means. So the power is called judicial review, and any law that is considered unconstitutional, it must be voided. It must be canceled. All right, so today we learned about the roles and the responsibility of the three branches of government, which are the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Each branch has a job to do. Each branch has responsibilities, and they are responsible for staying in their lane, doing their job, mind your business. But we also make the three branches work together. That is going to lead into the next lesson, which is about the principles of government, which will include checks and balances. All right, if you know what I'm talking about, outstanding. If not, that's got to be a review of 7th grade history, because 7th grade is when you learn about the three branches of government, and then I do a quick review in 8th grade. So I want to really just thank you for joining me today, because here at the Urban Classroom, I am teaching about U.S. history from the 13 original English colonies all the way to settling the Western frontier after the Civil War and Reconstruction. Be sure to watch my next video. Remember, Unit 5 is long. It has 3 parts to it. I just finished part 1, but I got 2 more to do. So make sure you join me. Watch the next video. How about having a great day? And why don't you just make it a great day? Thanks for joining me today in the Urban Classroom. We'll see you guys. Have a good one. Bye.